empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for regrets. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited for this conversation because I really think that Joseph, as much as he drives me crazy, he has some good opinions. And actually introduced me to Abel, who I've not really I wanted to ask most of the stuff live. He said he was an open book, so we're good. But the conversation here, to my understanding, is you are somebody that is detransitioned.
Yes, I am what is now being referred as a detransitioner or a former transgender.
And I think these stories, just like stories of people that have successfully transitioned, are important to be told. And Joseph framed this as it will change your life. So I was like, all right, I am 100% in. So first off, how are you today, Abel?
I'm doing good. I'm finally awake on an interview, so that's good.
And it's super early. I felt so bad. Like, I always feel bad because you guys are like 3 hours behind me, but like...
I'm in Texas.
Oh, so you're good.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just Joseph, and that's fine. That's completely
Yeah, I'm the mean one.
How are you this morning, Joseph?
I'm doing good. I just woke up. I went to sleep yesterday, I think at 5 or 6 o'clock.
PM? So you've been sleeping for like 12 hours?
Yeah, and prior to that, I was unloading trucks for 36 hours. So I'm exhausted.
Oh my God. Okay. All right.
That's the job.
Understandable. Holy crap. All right. So, Abel, we're going to put you in the hot spot. We definitely are. All right. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? What happened?
Sure. For the people who don't know my story, so I'm a detransitioner. I started everything in California, finished in California, and I'm continuing everything in Texas. So in 2016 is when I officially started my transition. I went to see a therapist. On my first appointment with a therapist, she immediately referred me as a transgender woman. Did not want to gatekeep me, which wasn't one of the words she used, and said she had my letter to transition right away. Now, I didn't accept her letter that same day because I didn't want to go into this head first. I obviously wanted to make sure everything was good because part of me knew this was going to be irreversible. So I kept seeing her for months. Eventually,
how old were you,
year,
if you don't mind me asking?
I'm sorry, repeat that again?
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but how old were you?
I was 19 when I saw her.
Okay, so, and they referred you first day?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
No worries. But yeah, so this is typical in every story that someone who wants to transition, especially if you're in California. But again, I quickly was affirmed. I did not go into that right away. A couple months later that year is when I finally agreed to accepting that letter. And November of 2016 is when I finally started to go on hormones and socially transition.
Okay.
That went well. A few months later, April 2017 is when I got all my documents changed to reflect female. And then 11 months after starting hormones, which was October 2017, is when I saw another medical professional who signed off on surgery. Now, I was given 2 letters, and I didn't know this that day until a few weeks later in the mail when my insurance had emailed me, sent me a letter. they had given me a letter for top surgery and bottom surgery. Now, for those who don't know what top and bottom, for a man like myself, top is breast implants. Bottom would have removed my genitals and created a, best way I can say is a replica, and that's being a little nice with what I've seen online.
Yeah.
Um, Now, here's the thing though. Before I did anything with a therapist back in early 2016, I think, and this is because I am religious, I think it was the voice of God that was talking to me, and I agreed I wanted to wait at least 5 years before I got breast implants, and 10 years before I got bottom surgery. Now, obviously, I broke the first rule. I got breast implants, but I listened to that voice, and I didn't get the bottom surgery, even though, again, less than a year on being hormones, I was approved for surgery for both surgeries.
Wow.
So May of 2018 comes around, I get top surgery, and I ignored the bottom surgery. Everything goes well, and then I had a fallout with the transgender community, which eventually led me to um, a path of alcoholism and regret, and then eventually my detransition.
If you don't mind me asking, what caused the fallout with the transgender community?
Sure. So I was actually going to the police academy in California because I wanted to be a cop at the time.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Now I was also in a very pro pro LGBT city, very highly populated with other LGBT members. And there was no officers that were trans, so I was like, well, I'm trans, why not? And I wanted to be a cop, so I went to the academy. And they did not support me through any of it. Eventually, I failed the academy and was able to get at least on the radar of the chief of police for the department I wanted to work for. And I started volunteering for his department as a liaison for the trans and LGBT community. The first thing I went to do is to build a better relationship between both. And the transgender community didn't like that, and they
Oh, wow.
kicked me out, excommunicated me, and dragged my name through the mud, calling me every name under the book, as far right.
Okay.
I was a liberal, a Democrat, Mexican in Southern California, far from the far right.
That's awful. I'm really sorry to hear that. Do you think losing that community affected your decision about detransitioning?
I have to say a little, because as soon as they cut ties with me, because I was an active member of the community, my name again was being dragged through the mud as far right, and I think I was even accused of being a racist.
Oh, God.
Can you
Yeah.
explain that a little bit?
Again, it's been so long, and the only person who did talk to me, which was I think a couple months after that, or maybe within a year, said that the person who I talked to and someone who was running for office for the city council were dragging my name through the mud, and at least transphobic was one of the words they used.
And this is coming from the community you needed support from at the time, right?
Yes. Yeah. So with all that, and I was no longer part of the community. I was no longer being love bombed and/or affirmed, and I had nothing else in life at the time. So my mind started to think on its own, and I made the realization I might have made a mistake, which I did. And then one day I just wake up, look myself in the mirror, without clothes. I'm trying to be PG. And I look at myself, what the heck am I doing to my body? I realized that no matter what I would have done, if I would have had my face done, had every surgery imaginable, if the world would have recognized me as a woman, I realized that moment I would have never been a woman. I realized all I would have been is a man doing what I believed what a woman was, a caricature, in other words, because a man cannot be a woman, and vice versa. And I had to learn that the hard way.
So I want to push back just a little bit because I do believe that personally, I have no issue supporting trans people no matter what, and I understand where you're coming from, you're jaded and stuff like that, but I think they need to be supported. I think detransitioners need to be supported. I think there's this influx of, if you question your transness, and I've noticed this in, the bad seeds in the community saying, if you question it, then you're automatically kind of ousted. And that kind of seems to be where you're at. You're at this point where you needed that community to rely on, and they were just absent. I gotta ask, how did you were going to be a police, how did those people support you?
So those in the academy, they didn't. My classmates didn't know I was trans. The only ones that knew were the chain of command within the office and the teachers.
Okay, so they didn't have any clue. Were you nervous on telling them, or was there a reason why you held that back?
It was none of their concern.
Okay, that's fair.
And that was my mindset at then.
That's fair. That's totally fair. I get that. I want to ask, you said you were religious.
Yes.
How did that play? Did you have a hard time kind of, deciding whether or not it was, we've heard a lot of people saying it's a sin and it's, stuff like this. Did that play into your mindset when you initially started to transition?
No. So I was raised Catholic, and at such a young age, I was never really a fan of religion, just because it was pushed onto me at such an early age. I really didn't care enough about it. And during my transition, I ran away from religion. Even before then, I was distant from religion. I've only gone back to religion within the last few years.
Okay, that makes sense. When it comes to, you said you did end up getting top surgery. Was that something that was then reversible? How did you go about that decision process?
So it was reversible. Now I have a flat chest again, but even though it was reversed, most of the damage is not reversible. If you were to look at my chest and that of a detrans woman who passed top surgery, it's very identical. So if you didn't see the faces, you would assume both of us are trans men. But obviously, I have numbing. My chest is completely numb on parts of it. There is like a little cave underneath on my chest, so that's not fun. And obviously, huge scars in the center, underneath it, and everywhere.
Oh my goodness, that's awful. All right, let's go back to the beginning because I want to ask you. You said you got the sort of letter, right? The first day. What was that interview process like?
Wow, it's been like 7 years now, I think. So I don't really remember, but I know I told her I think I might be trans, and I obviously just want to get answers because I was 19, I was confused, I didn't know what to do with life.
And you think that played into you thinking that you were trans?
So as soon as I said that, that's when she said I was automatically a trans woman.
Oh my goodness. So it seems like, I don't know. It seems like maybe they were leading you in that direction, or do you think that you came to that decision on your own?
So I will say this. In the 7 years since that's happened, I've had the opportunity to speak to other people who are not her patients, but have been very close with some of her other patients and have connections to her. And she is someone who approves everyone. And as of now, I have not had a single report of anyone being denied under her care.
Oh my goodness.
That's all I can say, unfortunately.
Right. No, I don't want you to get yourself in trouble. I don't mean that. Yeah. What was it like when when you started hormones?
Well, just like everyone, I was happy. I thought this was who I was supposed to be. I was being love bomb affirmed as this is who I was supposed to be. So in the beginning, everything went well.
Did you okay, as somebody that was on, it's a new medication, were there side effects? Did it give you a kind of imbalance? Did you start to I guess feminize, right? Like with your hair and your body shape, your facial structure, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so the hormones did do their job. The fat was being redistributed around my body. I didn't really have much facial hair back then, which is surprising because I have a beard. Um, I should have emailed you some photos before and after, and you will be shocked. Actually, you know what? Let me turn off my camera and I can find some. So I'll
Okay.
keep talking, but I'll send you some emails right now.
Okay, wonderful.
But yeah, so the hormones did their job. They redistributed my fat. Didn't really have much hair to begin with, and I started to develop breast implants. I'm sorry, not breast implants. Well, that'd be interesting if I was developing breast implants, though.
That'd be actually kind of cool. We should be telling that story.
Yeah. Maybe.
Well, while you're doing that, can you tell us more about the conversations that led to your conclusion that you should transition?
Sure. Give me 1 second. I'm just getting all
You're
these
totally
photos.
fine. You're totally fine. Take your time. Joseph, tell us how you know Abel so we can give him a minute here.
I came across his story. He's been on a few different podcasts, including Gothics. That was where I first saw him tell his story. And that was a good experience for me because I didn't know a hell of a lot about this. Where I grew up, I'd seen transitioning people. Like I remember the first one. Okay, I was 16. She was low. She was a he or she. I honestly don't know what the hell that was, and I'm going to explain that right now because whatever that was right in the middle. Okay, so there was facial hair that looked natural. Like there was facial hair, but not so much facial hair that you would know right away that's a man's facial hair or just an older woman. And the person in question did have wrinkles. Okay. Now, as far as white hair, well, he or she was Mexican, so there wasn't really been evidence of a lot of white hair even at that age. There were implants. That tells you nothing. And I always wanted to go up to that manager and say, all right, what the hell are you? Okay, you need to tell me which way are you going because you are right there in the middle. I didn't, but I otherwise did not know anything about people who have transitioned or tried to fit. All right, in my mind, it was largely cosmetic. I didn't really have any strong thoughts about it. That was really all I knew. I had read some things back when I read more science literature. I read some things about it. I had read about things like gender dysphoria, possible treatments for that, possibility of surgical options for some people where hormone treatments weren't necessarily satisfying. I didn't really know a lot about this though. And then it's also became a hot button issue in politics, which really threw me off. I would never have seen that coming, 10 years ago, 15 years ago at all. So it was listening to Abel's story, especially at a time where everything is politicized. Everything has this sharp contrast where you are either on the left side or the right side. Nobody's really tolerating any kind of independence like me. You've already seen. In fact, this is just an interesting observation I've made. Before I used to show my face on screen, I was more often called conservative, and then when I started showing my face, I more often got called liberal. White. And I got accused of being white. That was another thing too. So listening to Abel's story was actually it was a shock to me because I never imagined that somebody could change back and then be labeled as a hateful person. That's the part of his story that stood out the most to me, that he was facing, that he was getting all these ugly labels and they were sticking. And all because he admitted to himself that he made a bad medical decision for himself. Completely unimaginable to me. I could never imagine somebody, somebody ever, let's say ever in my lifetime, people who have thyroid issues, where they think maybe they don't need the medication. I would never imagine somebody getting a hateful label because they gave up their medication,
Right.
or even people with psychiatric issues, like depression, by example. If they were to just completely give up on taking medication whatsoever, I could never imagine anybody had an ugly word for that, or any kind of bad perception of somebody like that. In my mind, they just made a medical decision, the one that was best for them. This was the first time, and I had to hear it all from Abel first, and that's why his story stood out to me. That was the first time I'd ever heard of anybody getting labeled for making a medical decision for themselves. Ever.
Well, here's the thing. I think people are afraid to tell these stories because they're afraid it's anti-trans. And my audience knows I'm not anti-trans. I think everybody's story is important. And I know I'll lose some people on this, but I don't think any one singular voice speaks for the trans community. I don't think one singular voice speaks for detransitioners. All we can do is live vicariously through Abel. And I think his story is just as important as somebody who transitioned. And I would gladly have them on my channel also.
And Abel's story stands out to me also because people are, as you said, there's a lot of assumption around it, that just the thought that you would have or attempt these conversations, where people start thinking that it's only because of some sense of discrimination that you hold. But and also at the same time, people don't want the entirety of the community labeled. First off, I don't like the idea of reducing people to communities. I think that's just something people do to themselves anyway. But if you're going to reduce them to a community, and that also means you're going to generalize them. So even if Abel's story isn't supposedly is not representative of the whole,
for sure,
or even what is common, that doesn't really matter. There is such thing as a significant minority, and a small minority can cause a lot of problems. And even with that, remember a lot of the conversation is around whether or not these surgeries are healthy, and also other or these surgeries are safe, and also a lot of a lot of conversation between patient and doctor. A lot of things that get left out. For somebody like Abel to say that, again, he thought the best decision for him was to reverse the surgery as much as possible, and now people think that's an act of discrimination. That's just crazy talk.
Yeah,
and that's a common. But now that's a common perception, and that is something that needs to be fought, because these are people that are going to make. These are people who are going to make a life-changing decision. Now, learn from this man who, at age 19, started a life-changing decision that you'll see when he tells his story. It's still haunting him today. And look, and then, so talk us through this, Abel. What are we looking at right now? Let's get back to your story.
All right. Well, if you want to start from the beginning, because I did send them in, the best to my ability of chronological order. So
you did perfect.
Yeah. So obviously that was me.
God, he's so cute.
That is me as a baby.
We didn't ever guess by looking at you now.
Like I said, I just wanted to show people what I look like all the way before I started medical transition. I don't know the age of these photos, unfortunately. That would be a conversation for my mother. That is actually right before I transitioned.
Okay.
That's the last photo I ever took.
That was the last photo. Okay.
Yeah. And Joe's gone.
Is this is the last photo you took before?
Yeah, I kind of messed
hormones.
Up. That's the final photo. The two after it are before. So that was when I was 19. That was in high school. and that was also high school. The
Okay.
one in all black was senior year. That one, I believe, is sophomore or junior year.
Okay.
And that is after I had my implants.
I accidentally skipped one. I apologize. There we go.
And that is when I was still transitioning, but I had finally came out as publicly as a detransitioner at my first interview ever. Meeting that same person a few years later. That was
Okay.
after I had, I want to say, after I had the implants removed, or at least when I had my chest. No, I had the implants removed by this photo.
Okay.
That was I messed up on chronological. That was
You are totally fine.
I had the implants recently removed. I was a few weeks off. And I had that was actually my first haircut.
That was your first haircut?
Yes, after growing out for many years.
So we get a timeline here, definitely established when it comes to, and like, I'm not gonna lie, you were gorgeous, like, you really were. So, what made you kind of start speaking out about this?
Well,
Joseph, where'd you go?
No, I accidentally hit the leave button. Sorry.
Rude.
That's
No,
okay.
we
Abel didn't want to hear me laughing at him.
we all know he doesn't want to listen to my story again. He's already heard it 1,000 times.
Yeah, once felt like 1,000. You take too long to talk.
I'm sorry. I know at this point, Joseph, if I never showed my face, Joseph could pretend to be me with the times he's heard my story.
All right, but anyway, keep going. Don't stop because of me, because we still need to get to the good part, because you have that point where you're not sure, and then you reach that conclusion where you decide you need to transition.
Yeah, there is one part in the beginning I left out because it's I would say the most spiciest part of the transition.
Spicy. Oh shit.
Well, you've heard it a million times, I'm sure, Joe.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Remember, this is your story. This is your time. So, you entertain the crowd, please.
So I have to go back now and a little back in my story. So before I actually started my transition, before I went to see a medical professional, I had actually came out to my mother telling her I think I might be trans. I'm gonna go see a medical professional to get some help. She didn't like it, and I told her, please don't tell my father, because I don't want to tell him now and then be wrong and then not do anything. And a little more history, just so people understand. So my parents came to the U.S. illegally. I'm an American, but I am also Mexican. So son of illegals, raised in Southern California, Central California, and Mexico. So just so people have a bit more background on me. Now, due to that, my father is very much more culturally Mexican than I am. And obviously, being very masculine, did not approve or appreciate what I was doing. So when he caught wind of what I was doing, he unfortunately had the idea to assist me with my confusion by taking me to Mexico.
Oh my goodness.
Brought $100 bill and had me sleep with a prostitute to fix myself.
Oh my.
Now,
I'm not gonna say anything because it's your dad.
No worries. I dragged him through the mud a few years after, but we have rebuilt our relationship, and
Oh, good.
he has made a mistake from that. That was a huge error, and I understand why he made the decision. And everyone on his side of the family, and obviously dragged him through the mud for that.
What do you know what his rationale was there?
Well, I was going to explain a bit more. So, like I said, so being raised religious, I was always raised that no sex till marriage. And prior to that, I had never dated anyone because I wanted to follow my religion. So I had never had sexual relationships. So my father assumed that if I have sexual relationship with a woman, obviously all this confusion would automatically go away. He was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, that incident made me hate him, traumatized me, and made me jump off the boat head first into all this transition. As I didn't realize it then, but a few years after, that was the trauma that made me want to escape from my body.
I can't even imagine. I am so sorry to hear that. Holy crap. That is awful.
So in that aftermath, Abel. So in that aftermath, what's next? So yeah. So then when you finally get a moment to yourself to sit and reflect on what had just happened, what's next?
I actually didn't really have time to reflect. Like I said, that's when I said I don't want. I was traumatized. I didn't want to be in my body anymore, and the story continues as it normally does. So I decided to finally transition. Later that year, I did. And
So then, did you have to speak to somebody else to settle that confusion?
no
You
one.
didn't.
I told my therapist, but she did not help me on what happened with that day.
She didn't have anything helpful to say. Well, not just that day. Well, yeah. Any of that. Just your therapist just generally was not helpful then.
No, she only cared on having me start my transition.
So it was the
Wow.
therapist that's really where the idea that you should transition. That's when that catalyzed, right?
Well, she wanted me to transition from the moment she saw me, but I'm sure that helped her a little.
And what did she see? Did you ask her why?
The only time I ever asked why was when she first told me she didn't want to gatekeep me. Or why was
Gatekeep you.
I.
That's such a weird thing to say to somebody as a therapist.
Well, to a little more history on this therapist, she is a lesbian in Southern California who works at the local LGBT community and is pretty high up in that in regarding the amount of therapists there are and her chain of command or seniority, I would say.
Does she have a public face?
I'm not entirely sure, and
No.
unfortunately, I can't answer that question.
Okay. No. All right. So she tells you this. I can tell by looking at you that you should be a woman. I can't. You know me. I have a sense of humor. That's some shit I would say to fuck around with somebody. That's not something a therapist should say to anybody. So I want to know. I want to know how you received that. So can you tell us how you process that statement?
So, being confused at the age of 19, not really knowing anything, and I always was raised by my parents to believe what professionals say, as they
Right.
are professionals. I had no reason to doubt her since I was confused myself, and that was the main reason why I went to see her.
Did you ever at any point think about getting a second opinion, especially after she wouldn't help you with your trauma?
No, I had no reason to doubt her, and at the time she was helpful.
And then you had the support of the trans community, so you felt like you were being helped at that point. You felt like that you weren't in the right body. Is that kind of your mindset?
Yeah, and then I know when I finally, right before I started medication, I had to go see my doctor, make sure everything was good. And he had a trans woman in the office. She wasn't a medical professional, she was just an activist
Mm-hmm.
hired by the clinic because it was a pro trans clinic.
Right.
And on my first meeting with her, she had me, because I was sitting down, she walked in, had me stand up, do a little twirl for her, And she told me just by doing that and looking at my body, she said she knew I was supposed to be born a woman.
Can you tell us in just a little bit more detail, like, what did she see in your walk? What did she
I,
see?
I have no idea. Never really asked her.
Not once.
No, because again, I was 19. I was already, by then, I had my mindset.
One more important question. They knew you were experiencing a strong sense of confusion before this conversation took place, right?
I would believe so.
Okay.
At least I know the therapist. I don't know how much my doctor knew, but I'm sure he had to at least be informed by the therapist ahead of time. And I'm sure the doctor informed this person before they walked in.
So I want to ask something. I think I know the answer, but just to be clear, before you had been put on hormones and started to socially transition, how many times had you been seen by a doctor or a therapist?
So that therapist, I want to say it might have been my first time seeing him, or maybe two. And I say that because he wasn't my normal doctor. My normal doctor had actually moved right before, a couple months before I started seeing this doctor. And I never really had a reason to go to doctors unless I was sick. So that was rare. The therapist, I started to see her early 2016, and I saw her either every 2 weeks or every month. And I want to say every 2 weeks sounds about more accurate.
Okay, so then after you were put on on hormones, you were seen every 2 weeks to kind of check in?
No, so I had to go see a doctor every 3 months after being on hormones, so they had to make sure my health was relatively good.
Okay, so there was you were in and out, and how did that play with your psyche, having to constantly being monitored in that way?
I rationed to myself that this was what I had to do to be who I was supposed to be.
Okay, I think that's fair. What went through your mind when they initially talked about bottom or top surgery?
So I know I told the doctor that I didn't want to get bottom surgery. I wanted to wait 10 years. I said I definitely wanted, I was there for breast implants. And eventually down the road, I wanted to get feminine facial surgery and appear more as a woman. But obviously, he gave me the letter for both top and bottom.
Questionable, because you did not want the bottom surgery. Did anybody question that?
No. No one questioned me on anything. And that's because I didn't tell anyone that I was having any surgeries.
Okay.
So when it came to your appearance, not to get too personal, but did they eventually come around to accept you? How did everything go from going and getting a prostitute to actually seeing you as a female?
So none of my family members approved of what I was doing, but because I was family, they in the end still accepted me, which is completely the opposite of what the transgender community was telling me at the time, both in person and on social media, that they hated me because I was now who I was supposed to be.
Wait, they were telling you your family hated you?
Yes, which is what you hear on social media, which is what you hear everywhere.
Oh, thank God I don't go on. I love being away from most social media besides YouTube. I'm not gonna lie. I absolutely love it. It is you find the worst kind of people there, especially when you're living and you're like, no, I'm my parents are accepting me, and they're trying to tell you the exact opposite. That had to be a bit bothersome.
Well, I did believe them in the beginning. And now 7 years away from that, or from when I started, I realized they are insane. And that's putting it lightly.
How is your family with you now?
My father and I have a much better relationship.
Good.
My mother and I better-ish, but still rocky. And that's because now both of my parents are unfortunately divorced. Um, and my father's new marriage is actually much better. Let me rephrase that because I know if my mother hears it, she's gonna call me. It's like I'm gonna murder you. Um, with what I've seen with my father and my stepmom, my father is doing better now and has improved his life as he realized that uh, he's made a lot of mistakes, especially with me. My mother, she's still doing good, but her new marriage is not one I'm a fan of because
Gotcha.
she actually became a lesbian. Now, I don't have an issue with her being a lesbian. My issue is the fact that who she married. Nobody on her side of the family likes her, mostly my grandparents. And no, that's not because they are old Mexicans. It's because the lady is a cunt, and I'm being honest. I'm gonna shoot straight. She's a cunt, and she's the only person I do not out of those two, my father's wife and my mother's partner, and you can already tell that I have a slight bias. I someone I will not call my stepmother, and I address her by her real name, which unfortunately I cannot say on air.
Yeah, definitely. I actually didn't ask. We got a question. How was your early life with your parents?
So my early life with my family or my parents, again, my mother came to the U.S. pregnant with me from Mexico. And I joke on her that she's an Olympian because she did cross country running and swimming.
Oh my gosh.
All pregnant.
Oh, that's so sweet, though.
She should get 2 medals.
Double
Gold and
the Mother's
silver.
Day presents.
Yeah, she should get 2 medals for each event.
But jokes aside, after I was born, we went straight to Mexico. Spent the first 3 years of my life in Mexico, and the rest in Central California and Southern California. In the time that I was in Central California, due to my parents' immigration status, my father couldn't really work and had to work in the fields and long hours, little pay. And so I was mostly raised by my grandparents. So I didn't really have a relationship with my parents. Now, I've always been a kid who is a little awkward, and I always stayed to myself, thought a lot, which is why I was really never fit in with other boys growing up. Which, at a young age, that is made me what originally had me question myself if I was supposed to be a boy because I didn't think I could meet the standards of what it meant to be a boy in my culture, and eventually a man.
I totally you know what, it's very hard when you don't get along with your own gender, because I remember growing up and I was actually, and I'm not trying to compare, but I was diagnosed with body dysmorphia, which is similar in the aspect that you don't see your body as it naturally is, right? I would wake up and count my ribs at night and but still think I was this giant monster, right? So it's really hard when you're young to not have that kind of kids your age that you can hang around with and be friends with, and that can make you feel better. And one term I kept noticing you using was love bombing. You were saying that the trans community love bombed you. Can you kind of elaborate on what you meant there?
Sure. They were mostly, it was, this is who I was supposed to be. I'm finally the woman I was meant to be born as, and obviously attacking my family, saying that they hate me since this is who I was supposed to be.
Did you ever start to try to reach out to somebody that maybe, like, you had a few, I'm guessing, close friends in the trans community that you had conversation with? Did you ever think that maybe these weren't the people that necessarily had your best interest in mind?
Not in the beginning, and not until after I had left the community, just because a part of me was blind to assuming anything and anyone in the trans community was wrong.
Okay, that's fair. And you said eventually after you started to detransition, they called you far right.
No, they
How
called
does that
me
logic
far
go?
right. So they called me far right while I was still a trans woman.
Oh, while you were still okay.
Yeah. And they knew who I was. Again, I was a member of the community, and which is that's why I was laughing when I first heard that, and I didn't take it seriously.
Was there a certain reason? Like, what gave them that idea?
I wanted to be a cop, and that was it.
Oh, it was the cop thing. Okay. So being a cop makes you far right. Okay. I can follow the logic. It doesn't make sense, but I can try.
So then a side question, Abel, when you see cops labeled as leftist cops, does that make sense to you? Did you have, how do you respond to that actually? Better question.
I honestly, I've learned as I've gotten older to just judge people individually. There are going to be people on both sides, on the far left and the far right, that are both good and bad on everything. So cops can be far left and far right, and you just judge them as people.
And
Overall,
a lot of them fall in the middle as to really political ideology. A lot of the extremes are really not there as much as we think. I want to address this though, because I keep seeing this kind of conversation in the chat. And I think these conversations are very important. But we're getting like the fact that you had a picture with Eliza Schaefer.
Yes, I understand. Elijah, as time has progressed, has gone a bit more on the right. I will say, for when the photo was taken, when I did follow him, he was more centrist. So I understand why some people would accuse me of being far right. And in the second photo, that is the most recent, but I also have to give at least some respect to the person who gave me the first platform to speak on. And that's at least why I have no issue against Elijah. Yes, I will say that some of his stuff over time is not something I'm a fan of, but I still have to give him some respect for giving me the opportunity when nobody in the beginning would.
And that's fair. I totally understand that. Not an Elijah Schaefer fan, not even a little bit, but I can understand. I can still look back, and the first shout out I ever got on my channel, I can still say thank you. You know what I mean? Like, there's still a little bit of respect there, but he also has a question. Why are you following? Wait, Ken, did you go look at like his his social media?
I am on social media, but right now I am taking a break, so I don't know what's going on. But why am I following lawmakers that call other trans people groomers, label them as degenerates like the Nazis? I have no idea what you mean by that. I don't really follow much lawmakers. The only ones I have followed or at least to my knowledge, are the ones who I have personally worked with on legislation here in the state of Texas.
And to be perfectly honest, I know with myself, I obviously not on Twitter, but on YouTube, I follow a bunch of people that I completely disagree with because I want to keep up on the news, right? Like, I'm subscribed to people that I ideologically and don't agree with, because I want to keep up with what is going on. And we don't know. I don't know. I'm just not willing to label it something. Joseph, do you follow anybody that you disagree with?
I'm not on social media. The only thing I really use is YouTube. Everybody has something to say for different reasons. I won't always agree with everybody, and I won't always disagree with everybody. I listen to what people have to say. I let them tell their stories. I try to figure out why they got there.
Right.
So I don't emphasize agreement or disagreement. That's thinking too far ahead. I want to listen from the ground up. What is their story? How did they reach that conclusion? So
Absolutely.
for me, disagreements aren't even the problem. So yeah, you've seen me have back and forth with the audience. I've had multiple conversations with Gothics Live about religion specifically. In fact, Abel was there for the last one. We all know, like, basically people reach, again, because they reach different conclusions for different reasons. I'm not combative about it, so I'm accepting of the fact that people are gonna have different reasons for believing different things. So I'm actually fine with that. It's a good learning experience.
And I actually think probably if I wanted Joseph to come on with somebody that had successfully transitioned, he would. So
Yeah.
I think there's, again, I don't want this to feel like an attack at all on Abel. I think, like I said, I think these conversations are important, and I definitely cover more than comics. I mean, that's my bread and butter, but I cover it all. I kind of don't know what I cover. I'm just a pop culture channel. But
Do you mind if I ask a question to chat? Because I'm reading chat right now.
absolutely, this is
I'm
all
being
about
accused
you.
of lying. I'm being accused of lying. Can I ask, what have I specifically lied about? That's at least what I would like to know, because I know I get accused of many things.
Ken's a bit of a reactionary.
Well, I'm not aware of this channel, so
Yeah, I apologize, but no, I don't think you.
I don't mind any questions, like I said. But I understand my story is very different. I understand my story is on the complete opposite side of what the media says. Compare if you listen to stories like Jazz Jennings, Dylan Mulvaney, and others who publicly seem as happy, and I will leave it there. Actually, I'd rather just leave it because I know I have my own personal opinions.
Right, and I understand that, and we all do. And I'm gonna support somebody when they're their healthiest, their most best self. And if this is what you're telling me, and I'm gonna believe you. And I think you've told us a lot that is a little worrisome. You shouldn't. You should be seeing a therapist more than one time.
Yes,
that's a little concerning in my book. Don't you think so, Joe?
Let Abel answer the question.
Well, we should always get, obviously, now that I've gotten much older, get more than one person to have a conversation, especially if you're doing something life-changing. But unfortunately, a lot, and what I have seen, a lot of the people who are approving others to transition, unfortunately, have a bias to have them continue to transition. And now I don't know what that exact bias for every individual, but I have seen that.
So do you not think they have their best interest in mind?
I want to say there are some people who believe this is the best thing that they should be doing, but I understand that this is a medical system that they are in, and that also might have a part in it.
A question. I don't think we got to. We went a few different directions. When you, how long did it take you to realize you should transition back? Can you talk about, to the best of your memory? Can you talk about how you reasoned? Obviously, it would have been a slow decision. So can you talk about how you started reasoning with yourself and reaching that conclusion?
So the first time I officially decided that I was making a mistake was after I got the implant and was attacked by the community. But before then is when, as like I said earlier in this conversation, I don't know what it was. It could have been the voice of God. More than likely what it was. But something in the beginning when I was going to therapy, I told myself I wanted to wait on surgeries. And I think that's what saved me in the long run, because I know had I not listened to that, I probably would have gone like everyone else, just quickly accepted that letter and had every surgery right away.
Now, when it
I-
comes to something like that, isn't there a massive expense involved?
Not in California. The state covers everything, and their insurance companies, whether they are private or state run, cover everything. And that is to as early as when I did it, which was 2016.
Okay, I wasn't sure what about that. And then, before Ken's leaving, but how do you feel when it comes to the anti-trans bills that are coming out now?
Well, my main question is, what do you mean by anti-trans bills? Because I've read some, mostly the bills that I have worked with, and none of these bills are quote unquote anti-trans. These bills are mostly just saying children do not have the mental capacity to make these lifelong changes and should at least wait till they are 18. And I would say reasonably that sounds sane, and because we have enough laws that say children aren't able to make enough choices for themselves before the age of 18, and at
Right.
18 they are a legal adult. So at least that way we can at least save some people from being medically harmed, because the thing is that we don't what we most people don't understand with this is that in states of like my old state California, they are referring everyone. There are stories of teenage girls and teenage boys who started it and are now obviously lifelong medical patients and are
Right.
having irreversible damages to their bodies, and they don't understand. And children run on emotions, and their brains are fully developed until 25. So how can we expect kids to reasonably understand that these drugs are going to sterilize them, castrate them, destroy their bodies, alter them, and if they're wrong, they have to live the rest of their life? And I know the levels of testosterone they give to women is that I would say similar to that of a bodybuilder. And all these drugs are or hormones are synthetic, none of it's natural. I know the highest level that I had for estrogen during my transition was that of a similar to the levels of a pregnant woman, which as a young man that is unhealthy.
well, synthetic or natural isn't really a problem. Synthetic just means that the same chemical was made in artificial conditions. That's so the real problem is that our bodies are not made to take extra amounts of any of these. It doesn't matter if you're producing that stuff naturally. There are consequences. There are guys that have naturally high levels of testosterone, and they may get bone problems. Um, they may get joint problems because the muscles grow. They put extra tension on the joints. Just by example, the real problem is that hormones are something that have to be they have to be balanced delicately in the body.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, because people are well, they're taking like listen to your story. They're taking these hormones because they're told they need to be somebody else, basically. Unfortunately, that's not really how the human body works. You can't just force it to be something else. There are consequences. So it's not the problem is not that the chemicals are synthetic. The problem is that our bodies individually are made for different amounts of these chemicals. So there are risks involved in just putting superficial amounts of these chemicals in the body.
No, and
But
you're right. And one thing I have learned, especially since and in these last couple of years, is that it's easy for a young man like myself to get estrogen or a young woman to get testosterone. But if I wanted to get testosterone, there are so many roadblocks to get that. There is a detransitioner who I know who wants to have testosterone, but it's very heavy regulated for him, even
yes,
though
that's true.
he is a biological man and is trying to detransition. For other young women who I've had the opportunity to talk to and want estrogen, again heavily regulated, but
And for some of that, forgive me for cutting you off, but for some of that, you can thank a lot of it is attributed to the anti-male rhetoric that has been occasionally heard in politics, but it's been there for a really long time, and occasionally it finds a place, and that's one of those examples. The anti-testosterone movement, it's a real thing because you all know that in conversations around men, there's always a conversation about male violence and male dominance, and it's attributed to testosterone a lot when you talk about male biology. And so the belief is less testosterone means that men will settle down and be more civil. And truth be told, it's not that simple. I'm not going to give an extensive lesson on that, but there are lessons on um, biological psychology that delve deeply into the consequences of raising and lowering testosterone in men, and sometimes they're similar. And for example, you can raise testosterone, make a man more irritable. You can lower his testosterone and make him more irritable. It would give somebody time if they're constantly irritated and they take it out on other people, unfortunately. And so it's not that simple. And more than that, we were always told growing up. You might remember this too, Abel. I know you and me are a few years apart, but still, when you were in high school, or did you? Did you have in physical education conversations about staying away for males, staying away from steroids?
No, I did not.
Okay, well, when I was growing up, that was a conversation because yes, it is true they have serious consequences, especially on developing bodies. And now, what is going on in all these teenagers that are transitioning? They're being given hormones, especially hormones that are not in amounts that are not native to their own bodies, and they have serious consequences. So I also found something else I wanted to highlight in this conversation about detransitioning. There's a huge step backwards going on because we were always told growing up, stay away from these hormones because there are serious consequences. And now we have a culture giving hormones to teenagers in that serious developmental stage. We're giving them. Uh-oh. Are you still there?
Yeah, you broke up for a second. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. My phone died. Anyway, because we were always told stay away from these hormones because there are consequences
Yes.
for taking synthetic hormones, especially in developmental stages. And that's exactly what transitioning is in part. It is in part giving people hormones during a serious developmental stage, and there are consequences for that. So I feel like a lot of history was actually ignored when a lot of history is being ignored at the same time. Just today, the conversation around transitioning, again, it's met with a lot of sensitivity, and it also shuts down any serious conversation. As Abel's highlighted, even for someone like him who's lived it, he was labeled for no good reason. But like I said, this is a conversation around somebody's health. You can't treat somebody's health with sensitivity like that. You can't just silence them. These are learning moments. These are teaching moments.
Yes, absolutely.
Censorship is not a solution.
Val, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate you, our token lefty. I love Val. But yes, and here's the thing. I think the problem is a lot of people want to ignore these conversations because they support the trans community and they feel like this is almost not supporting the trans community by highlighting these conversations. Have you noticed that, Abel? Like when it comes to, I guess, maybe more left-leaning channels, have you had anyone want to have this conversation with you?
Nobody on the left, besides Vice, has ever reached out to me for a conversation. But because I'm aware of the history Vice has, very divisive, unfortunately.
Yes.
That is actually the only interview I have ever said no to. That, and also at the time they had bombarded a lot of other public detransitioners with the exact same request, and a little digging down between me, a few other detransitioners, and my producer, we all came to the agreement that that was not a suitable interview. But I think
that was a mistake. To deny that interview, I think that was a mistake. I understand what you're talking about, but at the same time, it is a big channel. It is a big channel, and you could have always corrected your story later.
I'm aware, but
I would be afraid they would edit it deceptively.
Which is the reason why everyone came to an agreement that we would not go with Vice. But again, I'm open to all type of interviews. At the moment, I'm actually on a break from social media, legislation, and interviews. But I might be willing to do some interviews here and there.
Well, I appreciate it, even though you're on a break. But so, who have you spoken with? Who have you told your story to?
Mostly people on the right, because the right is more willing to give me an opportunity to speak without dragging me through the mud. I've had Epic Times reach out and made a few stories on me. I've had Blaze through Elisha Schaefer. Turning Point USA through Drew Hernandez. Gothics. A couple of feminists actually have interviewed me in the past. And these would be the radical feminists that you would see on social media.
Like a TERF or?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is considered a TERF? Let me see.
Well, I have a question for you. We spoke a moment ago about the supposedly anti-trans bills. I haven't seen a lot of them, but I do agree that at least some I've read, yeah, did seem a little unnecessary. Can't recall the exact text, but some of them make perfect sense to me, and I don't see anti-trans. I don't see anti-anybody in these bills at all. For example, best example actually, Arkansas, a bill was passed that allows lawsuits. Yeah, lawsuits for anybody who has transitioned as a minor, and allows lawsuits for, I think it's up to 20 years after the surgery. So
me personally, I think the statute of limitations for suing, just because we don't really know much on this, should be much longer than 20 years. Because right now my health has degraded really badly, unfortunately.
Again, give us those details, because that is something people don't understand. Hormones, again, they have serious consequences. You who has transitioned, you have taken a lot of hormones that they're hormones that your body naturally has, but you weren't supposed to take these hormones in these amounts. So tell us that experience. If you can start from day one, just tell us what you recall best, taking these hormones, going to and coming from.
Some of the issues I have developed, and I have to assume these are all due to hormones, because prior to hormones I was relatively healthy. And I say relatively because I was a little overweight. But I have a lot of brain fog, which isn't helpful, because people accuse me of being a liar. Now, besides that, obviously, I have tremors on half of my body, unfortunately.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Luckily, I can usually tell right before they happen, and I know at least once during an interview they happened, and I caught it right as it was happening. I obviously have joint issues, my back and other parts of my body ache, unfortunately. I don't know if I can have children, which is the worst part.
Oh no.
And as well, genital wise, these hormones have caused a lot of shrinkage, to the point that it's very difficult to use, unfortunately. And that's usually, and I mean that in the regards of using the restroom. Unfortunately, due to the shrinkage and the usability has been drastically decreased. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to use the restroom standing up. So I usually unfortunately have to sit down, which is relatively easier when I have the opportunity to do it. But due to that as well, I don't have control of myself anymore, and I have to be very cautious and patient of myself when I have to use the restroom, because if I don't, I will leak while urinating, and I will make a mess everywhere. And again, due to that size and usability being decreased, When I am finished, unfortunately, there is still some left, and I leak throughout the day after I'm done.
So then are your meals and meal times carefully calculated now?
Unfortunately, due to my work schedule, I normally eat once a day, which is not
Oh
good.
Oh
no.
man.
I work at nights, I sleep during the day, and I usually work out a few hours after I wake up. And by the end of my workout, I have maybe 3 hours to get to work, shower, and eat.
And how many years were you using female hormones?
November 2016 up to April of 2019. So about 2.5 years.
And then how and are you prescribed male hormones now?
I took testosterone for a few months, but because um, I realized I'm just doing the same thing, and I decided to stop taking all the
Mhm.
hormones these pharmaceuticals have given me. So I'm just working on uh, building it up naturally through working out and other avenues that one of my friends are helping me. I have friends who are Marines, and they are kicking my butt, figuratively speaking.
So you have a support system now. Are you seeing a doctor for the issues that you're having? Like, we,
No.
when will you?
Uh,
Is it?
Unfortunately, due to my history of doctors, therapists, and medical system,
I get it.
I'm a little too scared.
I get it. I do. That sounds awful. You won't know. Like the idea of you not being able to have kids is horrifying to me, and that's not something you'll even know for quite some time. So you like how does this seems like something that is so much more drastic that would affect your psyche than one could even begin to imagine.
Well, I will say, psychologically speaking, and Joe will probably agree with me. Us men don't really like to think about much of our feelings and push everything to the side, which is what I normally do. But
Deal with it later.
uh,
Yeah.
unfortunately, due to everything that's happened to me, figure, figuratively speaking, I have a lot of internal demons who are constantly shouting at me, reminding me of what I've done. And I can ignore them on a daily basis, but there are times that it gets too heavy, and I just hit a wall and just go into deep depression for a couple hours, a couple of days, and just isn't fun. I will say that. Now, I will say, due to my alcoholism, I have obviously tried to avoid alcohol. Try. But I made the rule that as long as I'm not using it to cope, it's okay. Yeah, I don't really drink that much anymore. So, but I've hit the breaking point a couple of times of almost drowning myself in alcoholism, due to obviously the damage it's done to me and everything that's happened.
Well, please don't let it get out of hand because I want to see you on future streams and I want to keep picking on you. Now, I
Right.
need this is an important question. Now, with your experience as an individual, this collective experience from age 19 on to now, because you hear stories of people who say that their surgery was successful. When you listen to their stories, well, first off, I should ask, do you often listen to stories of people who say their transition was successful?
I don't really listen to stories of people who transition or detransition nowadays. In the beginning, I did listen a bit more, but nowadays, I unfortunately don't have that time or luxury anymore.
When
Um,
you when you look to stories, but forgive me for getting off. Actually, go ahead, finish. I'll ask in a minute.
Yeah, so unfortunately nowadays, that is the luxury I don't have anymore. I'm usually working nonstop, doing some other stuff with my free time, and even with a break, even when I take breaks, I just don't want to listen to anything. So it's
Mhm.
mostly why I rarely handle my scheduling, and I leave that to my producer, who is unaware of this interview because Joe was the one who made the connection. I told him email my producer, so he's on aware.
Well, because I got through the Tristan soon. I didn't seem. It didn't seem necessary to me. I'm sorry.
Necessary because he handles my scheduling. He handles all my scheduling, so I can't have do something without his knowledge. Because if he were to plan something for me during this hour,
Well, for what it's worth, I wouldn't have thought to ask. For what it's worth.
yeah, well, he
Well,
handles everything.
so then when you think of stories past that you can recall where people have successfully transitioned, do you hear anything in their stories that make you think of your own and make you think or make you question or doubt stories of successful transitions?
Honestly, I doubt everything that they say, and I don't say that to be an asshole and to say I don't believe anyone's truly happy. I say that because I'm looking at it with, I'd say, with a fine comb, and I'm just listening to what they're saying. And unfortunately, I am very aware that those within the trans community are not willing to be 100% honest with any medical harm. And I say that because I know I still continue transitioning and dealing with these negative side effects I probably wouldn't have attributed to the transition. I know a lot of trans women who get bottom surgery. There's a lot of complications, and they will never outright admit that it was due to the surgery. They'll
Right.
probably say, "Oh well, the surgeon did a great job, but this is just my case," or I had a crappy surgeon, but overall I'm very happy. Or they'll do whatever they can not to say I made a mistake, because especially with influencers in the trans community, they don't want to paint anything in a negative light. And the best case or best example of that is Jazz Jennings. Jazz
Yeah.
had spinal surgery at 17 and has Jazz saying he a part of him is starting to realize he made a mistake. But Jazz's mother says you can't be saying that. What if you scare someone out of the transitioning? So that's why when I used to listen to people say, "Oh, I'm happy. This went great." Unfortunately, I have to add a little doubt to that.
Did the female hormones change your opinion though when you first got them? Do you feel like those affected you psychologically? Did it tell us that?
Yeah, it did affect me psychologically, and I say that because looking back, I did drastically change as a person. And my mother, I did have a conversation once with her, asking her, "So how was I before I did all this, during it, and now?" She says, "Before I was such a sweet kid. After that, after I started everything, I was a complete asshole." And
And that was
unfortunately,
on the female hormones.
yep.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Again, this is beside the fact that it was female hormones. Again, I was within. I have to outright say it's a cult. A lot of the transgender community is cult-like behavior. So
And
I,
you see right there, just a quick sidestep for people in the audience. Abel was given female hormones and would have naturally lowered his male hormones. And he actually got more irritated, not less irritated. This is something that science has been trying to teach the world for a while now, that raising and lowering hormones has consequences.
I was also
So,
prescribed spirulactone, which is which was used to reduce my testosterone. And I have spoken to some medical professionals that that's not even its main purpose. It's actually a heart a medication.
So they used it on its off-label purpose, I'm assuming.
Yes, a lot of hormones they are using off-label. Actually, none of these drugs are even FDA approved for what it's worth. They're not FDA approved for the purposes that they're using it right now, for testosterone for females, estrogen for males, spirulactone to as a testosterone suppressant, and I believe puberty blockers within the last few years got an FDA warning saying that they are causing brain swelling.
so are you taking those now?
No, I'm not taking any form of medication. Everything I am doing is to the best of my ability of being all natural. That again, that is with one of my friends who does not like anything synthetic, and he only does everything naturally. So
Mhm.
natural herbs, natural food. Doesn't. Yeah.
When
So
you were using this drug, was brain fog more or less prevalent?
it slowly was coming around over time, but I have realized now it's not. It's gotten worse, and it also doesn't help that Alzheimer's runs in my family, at least with one relative, to my knowledge. If I can't remember. That okay,
Oh.
that was a bad joke.
Well, but you're still so young.
Well, hopefully I can dodge that, but I will never know.
Well, spurlactone, to my understanding, is a diuretic that's used for generally as a heart medication, right? It's potassium sparing diuretic that kind of is used instead of something like lisinopril. I'm not going to go all into it and get all medical about it, but they actually specifically gave you that to reduce your testosterone, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
So Abel, you have gone through, now that you've gone through this, you've mentioned um, irreversible damage to your body as a result of the entire experience. To my knowledge, when hormones are misused, some effects can be reversed, some effects cannot. Can you tell us what is reversible and what is not reversible in you?
Again, not reversible. The shrinkage of my genitals, possible being sterilized.
Mhm.
Uh,
Were you ever given, and this is probably way too intrusive, but I gotta know, were you ever told that preemptively so you could take measures of freezing anything? Of no, okay, that's
I was
awful.
never
Like,
brought. That was never anything that was asked of me, told to me. I was the one who had to initiate that conversation. I said, "I want to have children eventually. Is there a way
right,
I can freeze my sperm and use it?" And I was told that my insurance would not cover it. So
but they'd cover the other stuff.
would cover obviously me destroying my body through surgeries and medication.
And on that subject, on that point, no, Abel, can you tell us about the conversations you had detransitioning? Because it's something that stood out most to me about your story is the intense conversation, the struggle. I believe you said it was 3 years before you could actually initiate any treatment to actually reverse the initial surgery. That's right?
No, so or well, let me at least bring it up to speed. So
Okay.
surgery was in May of 2018 for implants. My medical records state about a 3 to 4 month period is when I realized is I made a mistake. In that time period is when I was again also kicked out of the trans community, and I spoke to my doctor saying that I think I might have made a mistake and I wanted to see the possibility of detransitioning. So I went to go back to my therapist, who immediately affirmed me as a trans woman. Her response was, "It's not that I want to detransition; it's the fact that I have underlying childhood traumas, and I'm just recently recovering from top surgery."
Wait, she told you after you requested to detransition, she said, no, you don't really want to detransition?
That is correct. She said the reason why I'm having these thoughts of doubt with myself is because I had underlying childhood traumas that we haven't yet discussed, and I just had surgery and I'm still recovering.
So how far did you have to keep going with this before they would give you a chance and appropriately medicate you or demedicate you?
So after that session, as soon as she gave me that response, I continued seeing her for that day. But I realized, oh, she's crazy. And
That's wonderful.
I came up with a couple lies saying that my schedule was changing. I was getting a new job and I couldn't see her. So my schedule, my availability to see her in the near future is uncertain, but I would keep her in the loop. ran as fast as I could out of there, and never saw her ever again. After that, I called my insurance and said, I need a therapist. Who do you guys have? And there was one within the clinic that I was seeing. The first one was a lesbian woman within the LGBT center. The second was a gay man who was working for the clinic that was they majority, if not all they did was transgender health care. In the beginning, that was the main thing they did. But I think now that's all they do nowadays. I wouldn't be able to be 100% certain as I've left California, left that clinic, and I have no clue. But the second one, when I told him I wanted to, well, let me go back a little bit just because after the first one, I realized, okay, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get out of this easier than I presumed.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the army and I talked to them. It's like, okay, I'm a transgender woman. I'm trying to become a man again. Is there any way I can? If you guys tell me I have to reverse everything to enlist, is that a possibility? They said yes. Because at the time, Trump was the president and had recently signed that you cannot enlist or serve if you are transgender, which is the reason why I went to the army. So when they told me that, I was talking to the second therapist saying, I want to enlist into the army. Unfortunately, they will not let me enlist as a trans woman and are saying I must detransition. I tried every way to weasel my way out of transitioning and using the army as an excuse. In the end, he did not buy that and would not allow me to detransition and told me
Oh my
that
goodness.
um, I he thinks that he I don't know if he said he thinks or he knows, but overall it's better to go into law enforcement as a trans woman than being forced to detransition and go into the army and then going back to transition again. But the thing that stood out to me after I got my medical records from him was one of the reasons why he didn't want me to detransition was he told me I should not be too cavalier with my gender identity because I don't know the potential negative side effects of detransitioning.
Wait, but they didn't tell you the side effects of transitioning.
I'm glad you caught that.
Mhm.
And I hope chat just caught that as well. I was not told of any negative side effects to medically transition from biologically male to biologically male taking high levels of estrogen and testosterone suppressants to going back to being a man, not taking none of those medications. I was not told any negative side effects. I was not told to slow down to wait. But when I wanted to fix my body to reverse what I had done, that's when they said, no, 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 hold on, you might be wrong. And it's like, that's when I realized, okay, this is much deeper than I originally thought when I wanted to transition in the beginning. And I continued seeing him, and this is again during the time when I was battling my alcoholism. I was getting to my lowest point that I felt that there was no way to go around this or get back to my life. And I got lucky one day. I was working and I was on my phone while I worked and saw that there was an interview with a detransitioner, an old man who had gone through this. And I looked at his video and I did a bit more research on him. And then it took me a few weeks. But eventually I got the courage, emailed him saying, my name is Abel Garcia. I am a transgender woman in Southern California. I want to detransition, but I am getting no help. Is there any way you can help me? He replied, and eventually he was able to get me some help. And I think I have to say, by the grace of God, he had because he worked in the medical, not as a doctor or any of that. He was a therapist, I believe. I'll have to double check later. But he had a friend who was a therapist in my local area, recommended me to go see him, talk to him. And this therapist was the only therapist out of all the ones I had who was willing to listen to me without making a judgment call ahead of time. He told me on our first session that everything we were doing moving forward, if this is what I wanted to do, was of my own decision. Nothing was of him being pushed onto me.
Wow.
Because unfortunately, the state of California considers what he did conversion therapy.
What?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. So under California law, my last therapist is a criminal who practiced conversion therapy on an innocent trans woman of color.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
That's
I will
crazy.
never publicly out him, and he has told me he will never, if he were to be asked if he ever had me as a client, he will deny all claims of being my therapist.
Understandable.
Yeah.
I have to look into that. I want to find that code in California's criminal code. I didn't even know there were specific laws in California against that. I thought the ban was federal anyway, but I didn't know
I don't know
California
if
had
it's
specific laws.
federal or California more than likely has their own addition to it. But yes, what he was accused, he was formally never accused. Again, this is just a conversation between him and I, and me just stating that he is unfortunately now a criminal under California law if he were to ever be caught, as I am a
Wow.
public figure now.
So without this person, you would have never gotten help.
No, I would have never had help.
I am so sorry to hear that.
There's a few routes I could have gone through this. Had I never gotten help from him, I could have probably been caught back into the community and continued transitioning, or I could have gone still transitioning but realizing of my error and just continue becoming an alcoholic again. Or actually, I will not say this on there. There is one other option I had, but that's too drastic for interviews to be on air.
Are you sure?
Joe,
We like the good stuff here.
you know what? I'm not even going to continue that. Let's just say it would have not been a good option.
That is the most wild thing I've heard. They had no problem within 1 or 2 sessions to transition you, but you had to jump through hoops. When you told them about your issues with alcoholism, were they able to help with that? Did they address that?
No, they did not help me.
Oh my God. So I do want to ask you something specifically, because I noticed when you talk about somebody that is queer, you always mention their sexuality, and you said you think that it's a cult. What?
Well, that's only with the 2 therapists that I've had interaction with, just because I know they were one. Again, the first one worked at the LGBT community or LGBT center, and the second one was at a clinic that mostly, actually, majority of their work was transgender only. To only the rest of the LGB, but it was specifically built for transgender only.
So when you talk about, like, you're not against acceptance, you're against the idea of not helping people like you. You're against the idea of I don't want to say forcible transition, because I know you have your own agency, but a lot of what this feels like is that you were I don't know, maybe down, having some issues, and you were kind of shoved into this. Did you ever feel like the decision wasn't your own?
To a certain degree, I have to take responsibility for my own actions.
Right.
I was the one who signed all the paperwork, but being a 19-year-old kid who had no life experience, who being raised by two illegal immigrants who raised me as professionals, know what they're doing. They know what they speak about. I had no reason to doubt. So I believe that to a certain degree there is some. No, I know beyond a reasonable doubt actually that these people have to take some credit, some accountability for
Yes.
the harm they did to me and everyone else, whether they are still transitioning and don't want to admit that they are in pain, or those who have publicly came out as detransitioners.
So do you support people that have had, kind of a positive, a more me because there's been trans people for a long time, and we never heard the issue of more detransitioning until lately. Do you support people that have been, trans for I can't remember the girl's name. She sings that unholy song with Sam Smith, right? There's people that have been trans for years. Is that something that you support, or are you kind of jaded at this point?
I would say I do everything on an individual case by case, but unfortunately, what I have seen since the big in the 7 years that I've been doing this, a lot of the people who are transitioning are not what I would consider. No, let me rephrase that. The ones who are public have to behave the most reasonable, but the average individual who is transitioning is not mentally stable, as I have seen personal experience when I do have to go to testify in it, and I have to help in with other stuff. I have been harassed by people. I have been threatened, and so I have other detransitioners, and I have seen that firsthand. So I do everything on a case by case, but again, with what I've seen, with what has happened to me and others, and what I've just seen those who claim to be happy with their transition, I add a little bit of doubt to it, and that's just my personal opinion. I have no issue with adults living their lives. I just would want everyone to understand the full extent of what this actually is, then the small amount of possibility of being good comes out of it. And I say that because they didn't tell me any negative side effects. They only told me what I wanted to hear. And that is unfortunately what everyone is told, and especially kids who are very easily persuaded think it's good, especially when their only other option is self-deletion if they don't get what they get in these medications.
So with that in mind, Abel, question because you've had because you have gone through the hormonal treatments as well. First off, when you went through hormonal treatments, how long did it take you to become aware of psychological changes?
Are you speaking
So when you when you got the female hormone, sorry.
Okay, so I would say within a few weeks is when I started to notice some changes. I started to my chest started to have swelling, so I knew I was getting my fat being redistributed to my chest to develop breast. So that is the first thing I noticed within a few weeks.
All right. Now, when you see other people who have transition and they're on female hormones, do you see psychological changes in them that you saw in yourself?
Yeah, a lot of people are more angry, a lot of irritation, short fuses, and are not willing to have a reasonable conversation with anyone regarding this conversation, because they see everything and anything that, even if it slightly disapproves of it, as a outright genocide of them.
Yeah, I've noticed that pushed a lot lately, and I've noticed that even when I mentioned that, and you can see in the beginning, I had a few people that pushed back, and I am completely supportive. Like, I'll tell you right now, I'm relatively left leaning. I am supportive of the queer community. I have no issue, but my main issue is when people start aiming at detransitioners as a sort of enemy, right? Of sorts, like the the fact that you were immediately, even in my chat, labeled as right wing shows me that you're not open to these conversation. And I like North Star Ken. I just think that every side should be able to tell their story. And there's a lot I learned that I didn't know. And it's honestly, it feels very manipulative of what was done to you. Like, I feel like what you were taken advantage of in a way, and that's by our medical community. And that's what's scariest about it. Do you ever feel like they took advantage of you in kind of your I don't want to say weak mental state, but in the state
that
you
is
were
what it was.
in?
I was weak. And yes, to a certain degree, yes, I was taken advantage of. And if you want to use the word abuse by the medical system, there are some words I'm unfortunately not allowed to use. But I would not be hesitant to agree with some of the words used to describe what happened to me and others.
So you mentioned the trans genocide, and that's a rhetoric we've seen, especially coming out of the left wing, as of late. Do you think that's actually a thing, or do you think people are just kind of seeing, Joseph, I will kick your butt.
What?
You're
I do?
going,
I didn't say anything. Oh, sorry.
No, it's
You're
coming
fine.
on your end.
But do you
I
think
think
this is
it's
actually a
been-
real issue?
No, I do not believe this alleged genocide is happening. It is very hyperbolic, and
Yes.
it is used to as an emotional accusation. Because when we think of genocide, most people immediately, unconsciously assume of what the Germans did to the Jews
Right.
back in the 1930s, 40s, and these people paint themselves in that same light when people like myself, detransitioners, and others who have been affected by this personally or realize it's not as what we originally thought of, and are pushing back on this. Everyone is accused of being far right, Nazi, etc. But one thing a lot of these people don't understand, actually, a lot of the people who in this fight are women who are still Democrats or former Democrats, but do not consider them conservative or Republican because they don't like them. So they see themselves in the center. And even radical feminists, TERFs, whatever you want to, people from every side of the spectrum, on the far left to the far right, are coming together and realize, oh, this is not as what we were told.
Mhm.
This is, even the members of the LGBT community are realizing that this is not even what they assume, because being trans is completely different than being lesbian, gay, bisexual.
For sure.
The main thing, and I've heard a lot of legislators even try to say that we're attacking the trans community like they did it with the gays back then. But one thing I would love to ask these legislators, what surgeries, what medication did you have to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual compared to what I had to do to become trans?
Right. It was nothing.
Because, yeah, that's the thing, because lesbian, gay, bisexual is just you're sexually who you're attracted to. But to be trans, you have to take cross-sex hormones. You have to get surgeries that have a high complication rate. And you also have to force a lot of people within your life, especially who knew you before you did anything, to lie. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, people have to lie to a certain degree when you transition.
Oh my goodness. I gotta, and this is too personal, just tell me to fuck off. I'm fine with that. But now
Joseph, fuck off.
He's kidding. He's kidding.
Totally kidding.
I would never tell a lady to fuck off, but I will tell Joseph.
So that was for me.
Totally.
All right.
Is it hard now for you to look into the future of dating and growing your life with somebody?
I would love to eventually get married and start a family, but I don't know if I can have a family regarding children. So I don't know if I can now because I am now becoming a public figure all over the U.S. and around the world as a detransitioner, and especially here in the state of Texas. Maybe there's a possibility to get a girlfriend. And I'm not saying that because I'm starting to get a little bit of famous. I'm not using my relative fame to get a girlfriend, but I know that at least would give the other person more knowledge ahead of time. Compared
They would
to,
know what you've been through a bit, and it would kind of help. Like, those conversations would have to be hard, right? Like, that's a lot to tell a woman, and especially somebody you've grown fond of. I can't imagine, like use your fame, fucking do it.
All right.
Like,
all right, you're
Does it-
probably gonna send me on 10 different dating apps. Abel Garcia, public detransitioner, #1 enemy, has committed 420 individual genocides of trans people.
oh my gosh. Does it ever
Oh,
bug
God, I
you
said
though
that.
when people use like the trans issue as a grift? Like, one I've noticed recently lately is that Oil London, who was like
Ollie London, yeah,
or Ali, sorry. Who was, I don't, what was he, like trans Asian or something? Like, it was so weird.
Transracial,
Transracial.
trying to becoming Asian. To be more precise, South Korean, and then became a trans woman and is now a detransitioner. I know prior to all that he already had somewhat of a following, so for him it's not hard to get media notoriety. My public opinion on Ali is, I understand he was hurt, but I do have some questions only because on how quickly he did everything and how quickly he is now getting media attention with now a book coming out.
Right. I went through this also by my book. Like, I feel like there is a subset that is taking advantage, and then there is real people wanting their stories to be told. And I'm not saying that he's not a real person. I'm just saying, I see you. You're on my radar. You seem a little sus. Not you, him.
No, I understand. And that's the other thing. I don't have an issue with detransitioners writing books. Like, if you wanted to write a memoir on your story, that's fine. But I think the main question most people would have for Ali would be how quickly everything came out and how quickly he said, "Oh, I'm making a book now." It's like,
right.
Questionable, but okay, you do you.
A little sus, but I think there are important stories to be told here, and if you, my thing when it comes to, like, because I enjoy a good debate. I've schooled Joseph quite a few times. Just saying. But when I go into a debate, I want to know all sides of the story. So if you are advocating for, the LGBT community or trans people in general, you should know both sides of the story. You should know your story. You should know people that have successfully transitioned. Because if you're not, you're going in there a little ignorant. And I didn't even know a lot until today. And I think it's really enlightening, and I think it's really smart to get that story out there. Like, I totally think you should start a YouTube channel. I think you should.
Oh, I have a YouTube channel.
Oh, you do? I'm totally subscribing.
Again, because I am on a hiatus, there is actually no new videos being made. There is, so at least let me say that to people. So if you guys want to follow, I have Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. As of right now, I am on a hiatus. I am taking a break just because, obviously, this work is not easy. It's mentally stressful, but my accounts, well, at least Twitter and Instagram, if you follow me there will be content being posted relatively soon. But be aware that will not be me making the content. That will actually be my producer taking control of it, and just so at least everyone knows I'm at least alive. Because I know people are going to be questioning how I'm doing, so at least I'm going to have him at least send out a tweet, send out a Instagram post. I don't know what they're called. Every so often.
Yeah, and do you get when like I pinned his YouTube channel, by the way, guys, so you can check it out. But do you get like, especially on Twitter, because I think it's a very malicious platform. I don't like it. Do you get a lot of like the transphobe kind of
Yeah, I get
complaints?
some. I get
Okay.
a lot of that I'm a transphobe, that I hate trans people. The funniest one was actually last month, right before I took my break. A friend of mine who is a D sister, which is slightly different than Detransitioner, and I'll explain that in this after I'm done with this little story.
I was gonna ask. Okay, thank you.
There someone had made a post saying there are four because Twitter had removed that it is no longer, you can't complain on their site if you call a trans woman a man, or a trans woman or a trans man a woman. So that's not an offense you can get in trouble for anymore.
Misgendering. Okay.
Yeah. So someone had tagged 4 accounts. My friend, who is a D sister, said that she's blocked by all of them but one. And I misread it, saying that she was only blocked by one. So I looked at all of them, screenshotted all of them, and I said, those are rookie numbers. I'm blocked by 3 out of 4. Later that day, the one who didn't block me tried to quote tweeted me, trying to attack me. And in the end, and I'm going to be an asshole, he was saying that I was, in the end, he said, this is the only way you get to talk to trans women, which is, I guess the best way to put it is like being a elementary school bully. Like, allegedly boys are mean to girls because they like them. And I immediately clapped back with, I have no issue talking with other men. I just don't waste my time talking to mentally ill men who think they are women. And I added at the end, don't shed any of your crocodile's tears on me. I don't care. Because he was saying he's so sad. This is the only way I get to talk to trans women. After that, didn't hear anything from him.
Oh my goodness. So you won't, this is a weird question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You won't use people's pronouns?
Relatively, no. Now, when people are assholes, obviously, and I'm very aware of their situation, I will be petty, as that is the Latin blood in me. We can
That's
be
fair.
very,
I'm petty
very
as fuck.
petty.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So relatively, so for in general, the way I do it, just because I have trained with law enforcement, I have associated with people within the military, and I have a background in security. I'm used to using people's names, personally their last names, so that's usually how I will handle things. So I don't really like using pronouns in general.
That's fair. I understand. See, I've never had an issue, but I did get called transphobic, which is completely not the case. But because I wouldn't use the school shooter's correct pronouns, and I was like, yeah, she just killed a bunch of people. You can kiss my ass when it comes to that. It's not transphobic. Fuck that bitch. She killed children. Like, I'm not gonna use. That's not.
When I heard of that, you know what? I don't mean this as funny of what happened there. I'm saying this funny as the timing, because I was actually at the Capitol in Austin that day, testifying on a bill to protect children when that happened. So I was not on social media at all that day. And when I was coming home that next day, that's when my phone was blowing up. Twitter saying school shooting in Tennessee. People were saying the most asinine reasons for the shooting, saying this is what people deserve because they outlawed trans kids. And I'm just like, ooh, that is not a good thing.
Yeah, that's nothing is okay about that.
But yeah, there was a lot of asinine stuff. And then again, timing, a few days after that, and my hearing, and obviously being harassed by people. I actually had a nightmare, like I think a day or two after that I was back in Austin being chased by activists with guns. And I was like,
Oh my goodness.
why is the timing of this happening? Literally, I had gotten home from work, got into bed, woke up like less than 3 hours later. My bed was sweating, like wet from my sweat. I was like, and I woke up screaming like what the hell's going on?
Oh my goodness. Can you mentioned, and I don't know the difference, so I was curious if you can tell us the difference between a detransitioner and desister.
Yeah, desister. So detransitioner is someone who, well, both of them are people who have the idea of wanting to transition, but a detransitioner is someone who medically became trans and had medical and/or surgical intervention, like me. And a desister is someone who had the thoughts of transitioning, but in the end did not medically make any changes or had surgical intervention. So it was just they only changed their names, pronouns, maybe how they dressed, and that was it.
Okay. I had no idea. Someone brought that up last week, and I was like, I know. I'm sorry. I didn't know there was a difference, so I appreciate that. What do you do? You mentioned your political stuff that you do. Can you explain that to us a little bit? Because you said you were protecting children and...
Yes. So even though I was accused of supporting 400 anti-trans bills, most of the work that I do is going to legislation and helping pass some of these bills with my public testimony as someone who has been medically harmed by this, especially in a very liberal state, which is why I prefer going to more conservative states. And honestly, those are the only ones who are enacting these bills. And
right.
I try to say, I understand I'm not from the state. I understand everything happened in California, but this is something in a much more liberal state. And if it's happening in such a liberal state and here, what's the difference of what happened to me in California to what will happen here to kids? So, because I know a lot of the legislators, especially the Democrats, will say, well, you're not from our state, so why should we care about your story? Which I've had that, even though I am a Texas resident now. My story is still dragged by a lot of the Democrats here in Austin.
So have you had them tell you could not talk in certain states?
No, I'm still invited. I still get invited, but I am on my hiatus, so I'm not doing any legislation at all unless it is Texas, as I can drive to Austin.
Right. It's a little bit different getting in a plane.
Yeah. But again, a lot of the legislators in Texas have even, and I was listening to one of the recent bills, and they were saying, well, we only had one Texan, harmed in Texan, who testified against it. And I understand, and I get it, but one thing I in my opinion, and which is what one of the reps who helped propose the bill said, yes, we are Texas. We have a history of saying everyone outside of Texas pissed the fuck off, and we don't care. But but the thing is, this is not just a Texas only or a California only. This is happening in all 50 states in the U.S. and nationally all over the world. So it's something that we should take with understanding of what's happening in other states, what's happening in other countries. Because the United Kingdom, their major clinic just shut down, and they just had a report that with the Travis Stock clinic. California is passing laws that kids in other states can run away from their home state if it's a conservative state to California and medically and surgically transfer.
Kids?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, there is a few bills, and the funniest part, and I use the word funny a lot, just to help myself and not be feel insane. But the senator in California, who I will not personally give his full name, but his last name is Wiener.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I believe he's a gay man, and he has a history of proposing and getting the worst laws passed. You can now give HIV and AIDS to someone else in the state of California and not be criminally held liable.
Oh,
If
Yeah,
you
if it's an
intentionally-
accident, yeah.
Yeah. So if I had AIDS or HIV and I give it to Joe and I knew
But it's not going to happen. Please make that clear.
you just have to buy me dinner, Joe, and get me a bottle of wine.
You're cheap. That's how these things happen.
To be fair, I was a trans woman. I understand how to play the game, so just give me a bottle of wine and some dinner, and I'll be fine. But some of the other bills this senator has passed is kids can get medication. If you're, I believe it's either 12 or 13, you can get medication without your parents' consent. I know he did that mostly for the COVID-19 vaccine, but it was for all type of medication vaccines. But the main one was if a kid in Texas wants to transition, if mommy says yes, but daddy says no, mommy can say, piss off, dad. And I just used the middle finger on there. So sorry.
No, you're fine. I promise.
So the mom and the kid will leave Texas, go to California, and the state will cover everything. That is a bill that did pass.
Oh my. So when Ken proposed earlier, these 400 bills, a lot of them are a little, you can't just kind of paint them all with a broad brush because they're bills like this that are included in that.
So these bills that California senator, I doubt Ken will ever speak about and will say, okay, maybe these are bad bills. Maybe.
Right.
I'm going to say I doubt he will. And that's bills that I fight against and others we are fighting against because that is, one, you are impeding with another state. And California in that bill says that the courts will and can ignore a court ruling from another state if that child is originally from their state. So if that father in Texas says, I want my kid back and we're having a court case right now, and the mom said piss off and runs away while there is an active case, California, a judge can say, they're in our state, piss off, and we're ignoring your orders from your judge.
That feels so unconstitutional.
Oh, it is.
No, the jurisdiction is by state anyway. So for the government, or in other words, for the legislature to order the courts to ignore rulings from other states, doesn't really matter. California and Nevada, Texas, and Arizona, these are different jurisdictions anyway. If there's no federal law at play, it doesn't matter.
But these bills are for minors. Minors don't really have much jurisdictions over themselves. That's usually the parents. But again, even so, if there is an active case, which there is actually, I don't know if this was made specifically for a specific family, but there is actually a father here in Texas. He ran for office. His wife is a pediatrician, and I have to use the word kidnap. I know it's hyperbolic, but took the kids and went to California, and is transitioning one of them as we speak.
Oh my goodness!
And court orders from Texas says she was not allowed to do any of that stuff.
It just feels so wrong. It just feels like there's so much. And again, being a person that supports trans people, it seems like they've almost pushed the boundaries too far. My biggest thing is you don't mess with kids. Kids are our future. That is who you protect. And a lot of times it doesn't feel like.
Joe, we can hear the air from your end.
Joe's heavy breathing.
Sorry about that.
You're totally fine.
I think he's heavy breathing from the date he's planning now.
Yeah, he's got it all planned out. The wine flavor, everything.
He's like.
Dirty bastard. I know where
Oh
you
my
live.
gosh.
Call me that after.
Oh my god,
I might
that's
have
too
been
funny.
raised Catholic, but who knows? After they
A good Catholic boy.
I was a prostitute.
You're not that kind of Catholic, are you?
Oh god.
I think it's a whole nother interview, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, that's too funny. So where have you traveled when it comes to talking about these different bills?
So I've traveled to Tennessee, and I was told I was going to testify, but at last minute I was told no. Which was fine because we had someone else testifying in support of that bill, and
Mhm.
it was a 7-2 in the end. With and because I guess the legislators had a feeling that how the media was going to portray everything, so they gave the opposition 4 votes, testimonies to speak against it, with 1 in support. Besides that, I've gone to California not to testify because I don't know what's up with how their legislation cycle is. But with the lady who I had a connection to in California says that all of the politicians already have the bills they want ready in advance before the session even starts. And she had to wait on legislators who were running to see who won, who lost, and who she had to go talk to. So California hasn't been a state I've testified on, but I mostly have worked on Texas, and that's honestly the only one I have personally. Personally, I've been testifying and will continue testifying until the session is completely over.
We got a question for you. Are you into comics or geek culture at all? What do you enjoy in your downtime?
Growing up, I was into anime, the old school ones, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh.
Freaking nerd. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Nowadays, honestly, I don't really do much. Again, my schedule before this hiatus and even right now, it's just booked with a lot of stuff, interviews, testifying, traveling, trying to get some time off away from this insanity. And right now, even though I am on a hiatus, I still am working my main job. And I am working some stuff in the background, which I cannot publicly say what I'm working on because I want to. It's some fun stuff I'm actually working on for my own personal stuff.
You deserve some fun.
I told Joe what I'm actually working on off air, but there is some stuff I'm working, and I just have to get all the logistics done before I can publicly say anything. But I am just trying to work on myself. I'm actually gonna start buying some books and reading some stuff. I don't know what I'm gonna read yet. So if anyone has any books of recommendations, I'll take them. My main goal is just more of self-improvement because I know I make a lot of mistakes in my daily life. So books
We
to
all
help
do.
me. Books to improve myself. Let's just go.
There you go. That's wonderful, and that actually leads to kind of before we wrap up, I want to ask you, what do you see for yourself in the future? Where do you want to go from here?
Well, I can go a couple different routes. I can once all this is over, if I'm able to start a family, I would love to start a family. But once all this is finally over, either I'm gonna make a final post on social media and say thank you everyone for your support. Unfortunately, this is the last post. I'm going away from social media, deleting everything, or I'll probably leave it and just let Twitter eventually close the accounts because now they are closing accounts. But that is one thing, one option. Option 2 is once all this is still over, use my platform and work on other stuff. And I know once all this is over, once we completely understand the totality of the damage that was done to not just children but young adults, maybe I can do what the gentleman who helped me fix my life, the Detransitioner, because he's 82 now, so he's gonna probably die within the next 2 decades. Sadly, I suspect a bit earlier because of
Yeah.
the drugs he was on, and he actually had the full surgery. But maybe I might do what he's doing and help other those who were caught in this and assist him as I was assisted.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. But you say once this is all over, I don't see a quick end game. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is going to be an issue for a long time until we truly know the side effects. We truly know what's happening. And again, I feel like I have to keep saying this because I know I want to make it clear. I support adults in their decision. I'm very much so a live and let live person, but you got to understand their side effects, and we're seeing them right here through Abel. You know, I don't think there is an all over.
I think there will be. I want to say within the next, at most 10 years, is when we'll finally end this completely. And I say that mostly with how quick, because if you think about it, this one thing people actually don't understand, this actually has been going on much longer than we actually suspected. The old man who helped me, he did this in the 80s. And obviously it was ahead of there. We have seen history with the Germans in the 30s and 40s doing some of this. And obviously, so there is history of this. And overall, it has been a slow increase. But within the last decade, it just skyrocketed completely out of everything. I think had they had continued the route that they were going to slowly increasing it, like when you boil a frog, or that quote, you don't boil the frog immediately, you go slowly over time. Had they probably had done that, they probably would have gone an extra 100 years with this. It probably caught more people in this, but they went drastically in this, and it woke up a lot of people to how insane this truly is, because they're not just targeting children. Those who speak out against it are accused of being hateful, transphobic, bigoted Nazis, genocidal maniacs, and are accused of being far right only. But again, this encompasses the far left to the far right. We have radical feminists, we have liberals, Democrats, old school Democrats, which I would consider more of a John Kennedy, President Kennedy. I can't remember his first name because there's so many Kennedys, and a lot of the older Democrats who are against this would consider them a Kennedy-style Democrat.
Right. Old school liberal.
Yeah, and then we have people obviously on the right who obviously go more from a religious perspective, or what they consider everything reasonable. So yes, both sides are finally coming to understanding that. I will say to Ray, he's getting ready for a date for later tonight.
That's right.
Excuse him. But yeah, so this is not one-sided only. It's both sides understanding it's worse than we expected. And then when you see old little grandmas being attacked for saying women deserve women-only spaces, they don't want biological men in there, even if they are trans women who have had everything done, they still get attacked.
Protect the grandmas and protect the children.
Well, I'm in Texas, so the grandmas are protecting themselves.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Yeah, but I mean, this was amazing. I really appreciate your time, Abel. I learned a lot.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Ray's comment.
I told you guys, I'm tired. I had a long weekend. I'm sorry.
No, you were. I'm just glad you. I mean, I think it's great you were able to come on with me.
And now I'm having audio problems. I barely heard what you said. Yeah.
It's probably because you fell asleep with the phone in your hand.
I fell asleep standing.
Oh my god! That's his talent.
But one of the things is starting to wake up a lot of people regarding all this is the people who are defending everything and anything trans, these are young kids who cover their faces, wear all black. Now I don't know how much I can say, but are associated with the group Antifa. And
Yes.
again, I just don't know, as a public figure, I don't know how much I can say without being considered defaming and getting in legal trouble. But
They barely exist. You can't get in trouble for defaming them. You can't be held liable for defaming.
But you understand what I'm trying to say, Joe.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But again, a lot of the groups who support everyone gets to transition, anything, even if it's a slight roadblock, is transphobic. It's the people who mostly do that are very violent, if you see on social media, on how they behave. It doesn't matter if you're a leftist journalist or or on the right. Everyone gets attacked. Mm-hmm. I've been harassed by them, and now they've learned not to mess with me because the people who I associate with is like, oh, okay, we shouldn't mess with him because he's associated with this guy, and he's a little too crazy. Standards.
Well, I have one final question while we're approaching the usual cut time.
All right.
What
would your date is?
You shut your hole already.
Which one?
All of them. All of them at this point. Shit. Anyway, what were your exact thoughts when you finally decided for fact you need to transition back?
Again, that was I already said that earlier, that I realized I was making a mistake, and with how I was treated with the two therapists, no one truly helping me. I realized in the end, I'm going to kill myself early with all these drugs, and who knows what other negative side effects I'll get.
No, that's great. That's crazy stuff. And like I said, this is why I wanted you to have this conversation, because there is a lot of mythology surrounding these surgeries and really this culture in general. It's being treated with kid gloves. It's conversation around this topic generally is treated with sensitivity that does not make sense to me, because it's just not a learning attitude. That's not how I see the world. I don't appreciate the
I want to know what this means. Can we bring back the Josephine joke now?
No.
You went by Josephine for a while.
No, I didn't.
I'm just going to say,
absolutely
on the
did.
date, I'm going to identify with being a trans woman again, because I've had that. Joe will be the man in the relationship since he's peeing.
We're states apart. No, you're screwed. You're lost. You're dead to me. Go away. I can do better than you, Abel. Period.
I've gotten enough flight miles on my apps that I can go and get a free ticket right now.
Nah, you're all used up. You're damaged. You're screwed. I don't need your baggage. Take that to Texas. Keep that shit in Texas.
Come on, Josephine.
That statement, we're gonna have to go on one. I don't know what it's called, but it's one of those macho podcasts where they bring all these women, calling them used up. Now for that statement, we have to go on together.
Oh my God, that would be great.
Joe just calling me used up baggage the whole stream.
Yeah, find someone on there to take up all your problems. Leave me out of this shit.
But Joseph, I want a strong, independent man.
Find another one.
Who has a better beer than me.
Oh my God, that's great.
I
mean, honestly, I want to thank you. Like, I know you were on a break. You didn't have to do this, but I really, really appreciate it. I think there's a lot more nuance than I was even aware of. I think there really is, and I think it's important to know that nuance. It's not just good or evil. It's not just black or white. There's a gray area that needs to be told too, and it's not phobic or anything to tell that story. And I really, really appreciate it. And Josephine.
You leave me
My
alone.
cat just
Well-
screamed. I apologize.
Well, thank you
You
for having me here, and you are right. Most people think this is just a black and white conversation, but actually, the black and white is on the far end on both on the spectrum.
Yes.
The majority of it is black, is actually gray, and unfortunately, the ones on the end of both sides are screaming at each other
Yes.
a little too loud. The right calling everyone on the other side groomers, and the ones on the left claiming a genocide while accusing everyone being a Nazi. But
And none of that
unfortunately-
conversation is helpful. It's not helpful.
Mm-mm.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right. Thank you guys so much, Abel. I will put all of your socials in the description so you guys can check him out. His channel is already pinned, so make sure you guys check it out.
And if you guys have Twitter and Instagram, my tag is officialableg.
Official Abel G. Okay. And I will make sure I put that in the description, and you guys all know Joe, Safine.
I hope YouTube takes your house next, lady.
So mean. All right, guys. Have a wonderful Monday, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.